It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. The father of Brianna Ghey calls on the Prime Minister to apologise for what he called degrading comments used in an attack on Sir Keir Starmer. Also tonight, we'll fight until absolute victory. As Israel's Prime Minister rejects a proposed ceasefire, we witness the desolation inside Gaza.
We've just reached the centre of Khan Yunis. It's just been captured, taken by the IDF. It was clearly, tell me, just look around, clearly a very, very heavy battle here.
Reports tonight from Iraq that a US military strike has killed a commander of the group responsible for attacks on US forces. The Prince of Wales speaks publicly for the first time since the King's cancer diagnosis was revealed, but his brother is already heading home. Pay up for the medical scandal, says a report, but victims fear they'll never see their compensation. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello, good evening. Degrading, dehumanising, he should apologise. The words to Sky News of the father of murdered teenager Brianna Ghey after the Prime Minister created a storm of outrage in the House of Commons for making a jibe about transgenderism during an attack on Sir Keir Starmer while Brianna's mother Esther was in Parliament. Mr Sunak has now invited her to a meeting about online safety. Here's our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen.
The brutal murder of trans teenager Brianna Ghey shocked the nation. Today, her mother Esther came to Parliament,
Prime Minister,
where Rishi Sunak made this jibe about Keir Starmer changing his mind.
Tuition fees, childcare, second referendums, defining a woman. Although in fairness, that was only 99% of a U-turn. Keir Starmer.
The Labour leader stunned.
Of all the weeks to say that, when Brianna's mother is in this chamber, shame, parading as a man of integrity when he's got absolutely no responsibility.
Gasps from MPs and immediately calls for the Prime Minister to apologise. He didn't, but said this to Brianna's mother.
To demonstrate the compassion and empathy that she did last weekend, I thought demonstrated the very best of humanity in the face of seeing the very worst of humanity, and she deserves all our admiration and praise for that.
Esther Ghey looked shaken as she left the session. Number 10 officials afterwards insisted it was not a transphobic remark and the Prime Minister was making a political point about Keir Starmer changing his position on gender issues. Raw politics, but perhaps without thinking of who was listening. Brianna's dad told Sky News, as the Prime Minister for our country, to come out with degrading comments like he did, regardless of them being in relation to discussions in Parliament, they are absolutely dehumanising. Identities of people should not be used in that manner, and I personally feel shocked by his comments and feel he should apologise for his remarks. Brianna's mother, who met the Labour leader, was in Parliament to attend a debate about mindfulness in schools with her local MP.
I think it's made things a lot more stressful and difficult for her today than it needed to be at a time when she's been through more than enough stress and upset than you would wish on even your worst enemy.
Senior Conservatives defended the remarks.
Absolutely, I know that the Prime Minister would never mean to cause anyone upset or harm.
Do you think Rishi Sunak did anything wrong at PMQs?
No, I don't.
By the evening, the Prime Minister had invited Brianna's parents to a meeting about online safety. It's not clear when it will happen. Ridiculing each other's records is part of the political knockabout in an election year, but it's heard far beyond this chamber. Tamara Cohen, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, our chief political correspondent John Craig joins me now from Downing Street. So it wasn't a joke, it was about Labour's flip-flopping, the government has said. Nonetheless, John, is the PM looking a bit accident-prone at the moment?
Well, this is Rishi Sunak's second apparent schoolboy error this week. Remember, a couple of days ago, he apparently accepted a £1,000 bet from Piers Morgan in an interview about flights to Rwanda. In the Prime Minister's questions, he either didn't hear or chose to ignore right at the beginning of PMQs when Sir Keir Starmer said Brianna's mother is here with us in the gallery. And he ploughed on with that attack on Sir Keir's flip-flopping, as he called it. He did not take up the invitation from a Labour MP to apologise at the end of Prime Minister's questions. And if he had thought about apologising in the afternoon, well, any such thoughts were completely dashed at 3 o'clock when Kemi Badenoch, the Equalities Minister, who MPs will tell you is ambitious, as on leadership manoeuvres, has her own agenda, launched into an attack on Sir Keir with some tweets. In the first one, she said it was shameful of Starmer to link his own inability to be clear on the matter of sex and gender directly to her grief. And in the second one, she said Keir Starmer's behaviour today shows Labour are happy to weaponise this issue when it suits them. Well, some Tory MPs were less than impressed. Jamie Wallace, the first trans MP, said Mr Sunak's comments were insensitive. Dehanna Davidson said they were disappointing. Well, the latest development is that Brianna's parents and family have been invited here for a meeting with the PM. He paid tribute to her comments at the weekend, the mother's comments at the weekend when she was talking about her campaign to clamp down on what's called the dark web, violent images in apps. What she's calling for is a ban on those being made available to under-16s after it emerged that Brianna's killers had been watching violent videos. So we wait to see if and when that meeting does take place.
John Craig, live for us there in Downing Street. Thank you. Now, hopes for an imminent ceasefire in Gaza are fading this evening after proposals from Hamas for a pause in fighting were rejected out of hand by Israel. But speaking tonight, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that while there were, in his words, non-starters in the Hamas plan, it did create what he calls space for an agreement to be reached. Well, Israel is continuing a large ground operation inside Gaza as the war enters its 5th month. Following the 7th of October attacks by Hamas, the IDF urged people to evacuate to the south for their safety as they bombarded the north. But since the 5th of December, a new phase of the war began with Israeli troops moving into Khan Yunis. Much of Gaza has now been made uninhabitable. The latest satellite analysis from the end of January found up to 175,000 buildings have been destroyed or damaged, shown here in red. And in the south, at least half of Khan Yunis is destroyed or damaged. Our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, was allowed into the city with the IDF. Here's his report.
The only way into Gaza for us right now is with the Israeli military. We were headed for Khan Yunis, which has been the focus of the heaviest fighting in recent weeks. For over an hour, we drove through southern Gaza, around pockets of ongoing battles. Not once, from the screens inside the heavily armoured vehicles, did I see any sign of remaining civilian life. Every single building, from what we could make out, had been scarred by the war. The roads are now muddy quagmires, churned by the winter rain and heavy tanks. This is no longer a city, it's a wasteland.
We've just reached the centre of Khan Yunis. It's just been captured, taken by the IDF. They think they've got control of it now, but there's a lot of gunfire still going on. And it was clearly, I mean, just look around, clearly a very, very heavy battle here.
The IDF had brought us in to show us a tunnel network under a residential neighbourhood. We walked down the dark passageways, 25 metres underneath the city, passing through different districts above us. The sound of fighting no longer audible.
I can't stand upright properly, I'm about 6'3". But, you know, the length of time it must have to have created these tunnels must have taken years.
The Israeli military told us that they believe Hamas leaders had been hiding down here, including Yahya Sinwar. It's certainly possible, but we saw no evidence of that for ourselves. What we did see was a prison cell. The RAF say they've been able to match DNA found down here to 3 of the released hostages. They think 12 in total were held here.
If anybody in the world needs evidence for the horrific actions that the terror entity Hamas has done, you're in it.
Our team in Gaza filmed some of the few who had remained in Khan Yunis, fleeing south in recent days. They're holding up their green Palestinian identity cards, hoping to be let through a temporary checkpoint made by Israeli tanks at the bottom of this street. It is a constant, desperate search for safety. The Palestinian people here have paid and are paying an almighty price for this.
They are. They are. So am I. I paid a price.
They would look at it and think, you're also fighting us. You're ruining our lives, you're destroying our houses. There's nothing for us to come back to. Can you understand how that might be
They should.
prevailing opinion?
I do. And I think that they should turn their rage towards Hamas.
But they'll probably turn their rage towards you as well.
And cement, maybe.
And that creates a problem.
Maybe they will. Maybe they will. At the end of the day, it's war up the top. It's war down here. War is not a pretty sight. My people were killed on the 7th of October, 2023, were slaughtered and burnt. What would Britain do if a terror entity entered Britain?
After 4 months of fighting, the Israeli military has not yet found and destroyed many of the tunnels, and they have not yet eliminated Hamas. They cannot then claim victory yet, and they might be running out of time. Whenever the end does come, it is hard to imagine what will be left of Gaza. Because this is what vengeance looks like. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Khan Yunis.
Well, as we were hearing, the faltering moves towards a ceasefire suffered a setback this evening when the Israeli Prime Minister emphatically rejected any deal that involved Hamas, calling their recent demands delusional. Sky's Dana Magne reports now from Jerusalem.
124 days. That is 4 long months since the hostages have been gone. Since Hamas kidnapped Eli's younger brother, 23-year-old Eviatar David, from the Nova Music Festival and took him somewhere into Gaza.
I want my brother back. I want all of the other hostages back. The men, the women, the children, the bodies, they all must return. So we'll have to do painful choices. But there's something we cannot agree with.
Hamas have offered their view on a deal, the return of these hostages in exchange for 1,500 Palestinian prisoners, 500 of those serving life sentences in Israel. A phased approach over 4.5 months, which would see aid brought back into Gaza and the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces.
Haven't seen them in a long time. Yeah, a few weeks.
The US Secretary of State looked tired through a flurry of final meetings. This, the last leg in his 5th Mideast tour, to try and secure a halt to hostilities, the return of the hostages and some kind of path forward.
I do believe that there is a very positive, powerful future that is possible, that genuinely integrates Israel into the region and addresses its most profound security needs, to be able to live in peace and genuine security, and also answers the aspirations of the Palestinian people.
But a diplomatic breakthrough still not there. Antony Blinken may be pulling all the diplomatic levers that he can, but Benjamin Netanyahu tends to walk his own path with his own political survival his top priority. And making too many concessions to secure this deal may be a price that he is not prepared to pay. And so it was. In an evening press conference, he declared himself unwilling to compromise.
The IDF are working systematically and they will achieve all the objectives of the war. They are going to release all the hostages and eliminate Hamas. And Gaza will no longer be a threat to Israel.
Which means the fighting will continue and the death and the destruction along with it. Our team filming today in Gaza City, a hellscape, barely a sign of life in amongst the ruins, and certainly none of the institutions that could sustain it.
There are no organisations here. Nothing left. No services, no hospitals, no clinic, no bank, nothing at all. The amount of destruction, you can't describe it. The picture will explain itself.
A picture for what happens on the day after in Gaza, though, still completely unclear. Brianna Ghey, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well, let's stay in the Middle East. And there was a US military strike in Baghdad tonight, which killed a commander of the group held responsible for an attack on US forces in Jordan. Videos show a car on fire on a busy road in the eastern part of the city after reports of a targeted bombing in the Iraqi capital. Well, our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, is live for us in Baghdad tonight. And we're told, Alex, that this is a commander of Kataib Hezbollah said to be behind that attack on Tower 22 in Jordan.
That's right. That's certainly what the Americans are claiming. Kataib Hezbollah is one of the main groups, if not the main fighting groups, which have been designated terrorist groups operating within Iraq and believed to be funded, supported, supplied with weapons by Iran. There has been a furious response about the killing of this fairly senior commander within Kataib Hezbollah. At the time, we were right at the area where the car was hit. We arrived there shortly afterwards. The locals around there were demanding an investigation by the Iraqi government, demanding that there was revenge. We're with a group that's gathered, which is marching towards the Green Zone, which during the Iraq war had a number of American forces stationed there. They want revenge. And there's been a statement from al-Nujaba, one of the other designated groups as terrorists by the Americans, calling for all the what's called the axis of resistance, that has a group of fighting forces with it, to come together and to get revenge against the Americans. There is a great deal of anger, a great deal of tension here. Well, I've been speaking to a number of those designated terrorist groups all day today, who were saying that they wanted the Iraqi government to negotiate with the American forces to leave the area, to leave Iraq, and to force a ceasefire in Gaza. When we first arrived here at this group, they thought we were Americans and we were nearly set upon by them because of the anger. When we explained that we were British, they calmed down a little bit. But there's a great deal of anger towards the Americans and a great deal of tension and demands that American forces leave Iraq as soon as possible and a ceasefire is negotiated in Gaza. And they insist that they will continue to attack American bases. There will be revenge attacks until there is a ceasefire in Gaza.
Alex Crawford updating us there live from Baghdad. Thank you. Now, it was a tale of two princes today, with the Prince of Wales resuming his royal duties and speaking publicly for the first time since the King revealed his treatment for cancer. The Duke of Sussex, meanwhile, is already on his way home after a 24-hour whistle-stop trip to the UK to see his father. Here's our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, and a warning of some flash photography coming up.
Following his father's diagnosis, much focus now on Prince William.
We really appreciate everyone's kind message. Thank you.
He's returning to royal duties after taking time off to support his wife recovering from surgery. At a fundraiser for London's Air Ambulance charity with some A-list assistance. Tom Cruise once invited the King to be his wingman. Now he's the support act.
I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you also for the kind messages of support for Catherine and for my father, especially in recent days. It means a great deal to us all. It's fair to say the past few weeks have had a rather medical focus, so I thought I'd come to an air ambulance function to get away from it all.
Earlier, the Prince of Wales handed out honours at Windsor Castle, including an MBE for the Lioness's greatest goal scorer, Ellen White.
I sent my best wishes to the King and obviously to Kate as well, to Princess of Wales. We really appreciated it. So yeah, it was something that obviously I wanted to send my best wishes.
And from the Commons came similar sentiments.
I know the thoughts of the House and the country are with the King and his family. We wish His Majesty a speedy recovery and look forward to him resuming his public-facing duties in due course.
Mr. Speaker, I join with the Prime Minister in sending His Majesty the King our very best wishes for his treatment. Across this House, we all look forward to seeing him back to full health as quickly as possible.
With the good wishes coming in, Prince Harry made his way out. After a whistle-stop visit seeing the King, he's already heading home to California. The rest of the family are rallying. Princess Anne at a bomb disposal barracks earlier. Even with the help of Hollywood friends, this is a challenging time for the royal family. And for Prince William personally, back after 3 weeks, the pressure is on. He's not been asked to deputise for the King yet, but we're told this could change should the need arise. The King remains at Sandringham, his constitutional work carrying on, but he'll be back in London soon as his cancer treatment continues. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Patient groups have welcomed a report which says they should get urgent financial support for medical damage they suffered. The review looked into 2 health scandals involving an epilepsy drug prescribed in pregnancy and pelvic mesh implants. But the exact level of support is still unclear, while victims of other health scandals continue to feel ignored. Our home editor, Jason Farrell, has this report.
They said to me,
Patricia was taking the drug Valporate during both of her pregnancies, not knowing it would cause her children to have autism and lifelong learning difficulties. Her son and daughter are growing up, but she's still caring for them. Joseph, now 23, still needs help dressing, washing.
Right, wait, Joseph.
Even crossing the road.
Make sure it's clear before you step out. Our biggest worry is what will happen to our children when the time comes that we're not here to look after them.
Exactly. Absolutely, 100%.
Today, families came to Parliament to hear a report by the Patient Safety Commissioner which recommends Valporate victims are given financial redress by the government.
It needs to be dealt with now, sooner rather than later. We shouldn't have to wait any longer than we already have done.
Also waiting years for support are women like Natasha, left disabled by mesh. She had to give up work and now relies on her teenage children for help around the house. Pelvic mesh implants were given to women to support internal organs after childbirth or a hysterectomy, but have left an estimated 10,000 people with disabilities as the mesh cut into their organs and nerves.
I didn't ask for this. This was supposed to be like a miracle cure, and it's taken our lives away. And that's wrong. That's so wrong.
Natasha couldn't make it to Parliament, but Kath Sampson is a long-time mesh campaigner.
Who should be paying for this?
Well, something that I've always said in my campaign is I believe industry should be paying for this. So if someone brings out a new medical device or a new medicine, they should pay a licence to be able to put that on the market. That fee then goes into a compensation pot that is already there for any future harm.
Today's report suggests a 2-stage payment system by the government, where the initial sum alone could amount to £500 million.
And it's right that the government carefully considers the report's recommendations. The Department for Health will be responding to the report in due course, and the Health Secretary will keep the House updated on a regular basis.
An independent review had previously recommended that 3 groups be given help. Primodos victims were also alleged to be damaged by a drug. And here, filmed on a phone in today's meeting, the lead campaigner, Mary Lyon, asked why they'd been left out.
And I'm here to ensure they are never forgotten.
And was told they were blocked by the government.
We want acknowledgement that harm was done. We want justice to be served. We want it to be recognised that the drugs caused the damage to our families.
Come on in.
For mesh and Valporate campaigners, they are a step closer to meaningful help. But they are still waiting for it to happen. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Police have today released new footage of the Clapham chemical attack suspect's movements on the night of the incident. In an update a week on from the attack, officers said his injuries could be fatal if they remain untreated. Police have also confirmed that the suspect had been in a relationship with the woman who was injured, adding the breakdown of that relationship could have been a motive for the attack last week. The victim is still sedated in hospital and is too poorly to speak.
As we've all seen, he's got a significant facial injury from the images in the CCTV. And through colleagues in the NCA, we have been liaising with medical experts about what the impact of that would be without medical intervention 7 days on. We have been able to ascertain that they were in a relationship and that relationship had broken down. But at the moment, without being able to speak to either of them, there is a limit to what we've been able to ascertain, but we believe that's one of the primary motives for the attack.
To Pakistan now, where the Foreign Ministry has said that border crossings into the country from Afghanistan and Iran will remain closed during the elections to ensure security. The announcement comes after at least 29 people died following 2 bombings in the southwest of the country in the Baluchistan province. Well, our Asia correspondent Cordelia Lynch has been to Karachi to meet one of the candidates hoping to be chosen to lead the country in tomorrow's election.
Bilawal Bhutto Zardari wants to lead Pakistan. He vows to end the politics of hate, but some say vengeance cuts right through this election, with Imran Khan, the most popular politician, forced out of the race, sentenced to 34 years in jail.
Pakistani politics is looking in a pretty shocking state right now. You've had protests, terror threats, you've got a front runner in jail. Do you think it's at breaking point?
I think that to an outsider it may look shocking, but unfortunately this is nothing new for Pakistani politics. What I'm campaigning on is to try and bring a change.
But many believe the military is pulling the strings and that their pick is Nawaz Sharif, a former Prime Minister who's also spent time behind bars.
They reportedly want Sharif at the top. Do you recognise that?
As far as the current situation is concerned, I'm sure Mr. Sharif himself and his party are trying to give this impression that they're the favoured son and it is inevitable they're to become Prime Minister, and they're hoping that that's a strong enough campaign to get them elected.
Bilawal Bhutto wants to be a change maker. He's more likely to be a kingmaker, a possible coalition partner, and achieving stability in a country where so many people feel alienated and angry. Well, that isn't going to be easy for anyone.
And the in tray is big: an economic crisis, a rising terror threat, and very volatile borders. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Karachi, Pakistan.
Back here, the Environment Agency is being taken to court by a campaign group over chicken manure and high pollution in the River Wye. The 2-day hearing, which began today, will examine claims that the agency has failed to protect the river. Sky's science correspondent Thomas Moore reports.
The River Wye flows for 150 miles, largely along the border of England and Wales. But its beauty is under threat from a beast. 20 million chickens are being raised in the surrounding fields at any one time, producing huge amounts of manure. Now a rivers charity is accusing the Environment Agency in Cardiff's High Court of failing in its legal duty to stop farmers spreading it on their fields in such excessive amounts that it washes off, polluting the river.
If you were, I don't know, building cars or something and you were allowed to do that with all your waste, I mean, that would just be the most appalling scandal. Well, that is what is happening. That is what is happening here in the Wye. Industrial waste is being dumped into nature, and it has been done so at such a level that it is now causing an ecological disaster. And it's got to stop.
The government brought in the farming rules for water 6 years ago, which imposed strict regulations for agriculture alongside lakes and rivers. But scientific studies have shown 2/3 of the phosphorus pollution in the Wye is coming from agriculture, and river campaigners say the rules just aren't being enforced. This is supposed to be one of the most highly protected rivers in the country, a special area of conservation, but it's now so polluted that as soon as the weather warms up, the water turns green with algae, stripping out the oxygen and smothering river life. Angela Jones calls herself the wild woman of the Wye. a swimmer who uses science and her senses to monitor the decline in water quality. She's anxious that others don't follow her into the water. Some days it's just too polluted.
I started finding that my eyes were starting to burn and my throat was burned in certain sections. So you used to be able to look at the different colours in the stones below and the rocks, and like I said, you would be able to spot fish a long way off, or, you know, it's just brown slime now. Brown slime.
The Environment Agency denies the campaigners' claims. It says nearly 500 farms were inspected in the area between April and December last year. Those in breach of the regulations may be served improvement orders and face possible prosecution. Thomas Moore, Sky News in Cardiff.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers and the press preview. Tonight, joined by Aubrey Allegretti, Chief Political Correspondent of The Times, and by Annabel Denham, Deputy Comment Editor of The Telegraph. Welcome to both of you. Well, among the stories, we'll be discussing this on the front of The Sun, as Prince William steps up to help his father after that cancer diagnosis. Their headline, Top Son. Plenty of that and more when we come back. This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories this evening. The father of Brianna Ghey has called on the Prime Minister to apologise for what he called degrading comments that he used to attack Sir Keir Starmer. Sky News has filmed a tunnel network underneath the Khan Yunis area of Gaza, while hopes of a pause in fighting are fading after the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected a Hamas ceasefire proposal. And Prince William has spoken publicly for the first time since the King's cancer diagnosis, thanking people for their messages of support for his father and for his wife. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with Aubrey Allegretti, Chief Political Correspondent of The Times, and Annabel Denham, Deputy Comment Editor at The Telegraph. Welcome to both of you. So to the front pages straight away. Let us kick off then with the Mirror. Shame on you. The Mirror leads with Keir Starmer's criticism of Rishi Sunak's controversial remarks about transgender issues in the House of Commons today. Prince Harry flying back to the US while Prince William returns to his royal duties after the King's cancer diagnosis is the lead story for the Metro. The headline, Duty Calls. Top Sun is how the Sun describes William's efforts to stand in for his father. While the Mail carries William's message to the people, thank you so much for all your kindness. The Guardian claims an exclusive with a report that Tory peer Baroness Mone told the government that she would not benefit personally from the deal later struck to supply over £200 million worth of PPE equipment during the COVID pandemic. The Office for Budget Responsibility has told the PM he must slash the benefits bill and get more people working rather than rely on immigration to reduce the country's debts. That's the Telegraph's lead. The Express suggests that Rishi Sunak may be considering a political comeback for Boris Johnson. The Eye has news of a medical study which suggests that taking erectile dysfunction drugs such as Viagra may reduce the risk of men developing Alzheimer's. Financial Times leading with the takeover of house builder Redrow by rivals Barratt and a deal worth £2.5 billion. And with another major storm about to hit the UK, the Star calls it the return of the beast from the east and predicts many Brits will head to Spain to avoid it or enjoy the snow. Or not enjoy the snow. Anyway, a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers for yourself while you watch our guests. So let's head to them, to Aubrey and to Annabel. Welcome to both of you. Aubrey, kick us off then. Daily Mirror, shame on you.
Yes, and this carries a photo on the front of Rishi Sunak at Prime Minister's Question Time today, along with Brianna Ghey and both her parents. Now, we've heard a lot about this today, but effectively, Brianna's mother was in Parliament today to meet several politicians, including Keir Starmer. And Keir Starmer opened the PMQs session by sort of paying tribute to her and saying it's wonderful to have her here. Then he went on to criticise Rishi Sunak about the NHS. And the Prime Minister retorted, saying, you know, you can't accuse me of having broken promises when you have yourself broken several pledges when you were trying to become Labour leader, and then listed them out. And then the sort of final one was equivocating on what or what wasn't a woman or what would define one. And that was judged by some to be in very poor taste, given that Brianna Ghey's mother was in Parliament that day. It's sort of now exploded into this bigger row where you have Conservative MPs who think that it was sort of very distasteful, and Brianna's father, who has called on the Prime Minister to apologise and said it's deeply offensive.
Yes, yeah, here on Sky News, exactly. And called to apologise, the PM was during Prime Minister's questions as well. And then afterwards, during the briefing, which I don't know if you were in it or not, but your colleagues would have been if you weren't, also refusing to apologise. Kemi Badenoch then came out and said that it was wrong of Sir Keir Starmer to relate this case to transgender issues as well. So, you know, where do you see this story going? Was it distasteful? And what should the Prime Minister now do about it?
Undoubtedly, it was a distasteful remark. I think part of the issue is that PMQs is not a natural arena for Keir Starmer or for Rishi Sunak. Neither of them lend themselves well to improvising. Rishi Sunak will have come in, perhaps unaware that Brianna's mother would have been in the gallery that day. He would have had his practiced, written out lines and went through with them, perhaps without fully thinking through the consequences. That said, to me, it appeared quite opportunistic for Keir Starmer to then respond, seemingly trying to score political points, which is what Kemi Badenoch, the Equalities Minister, said later this afternoon, perhaps being seen to slightly exploit the pain that Brianna's mother is in order to get one up over the Prime Minister. So what we now have is a situation where undoubtedly many members of the British public are giving an almighty groan, but Keir Starmer and Labour Party are demanding that Rishi Sunak apologise. The Tories, some Tories, are demanding that Keir Starmer apologise. And what I really hope is that Peter Spooner's intervention, where he has clearly taken Labour's side, insisted that the Prime Minister ought to apologise, I expect that could be the end of it.
Yes, not surprising that it is the left-leaning papers, The Mirror and now The Guardian as well, that have this on the front page. Brianna Ghey's father there condemns Sunak's dehumanising trans jibe. I suppose the problem is PMQs is there to shoehorn in your hits, your attack lines on each party. And for the Conservatives, it is that you have no plan, that you flip-flop and you're indecisive over your policies, which we'll come to in a minute. And, you try and land it at every opportunity. Is that part of the problem here, do you think?
Absolutely, and no more so in an election year. I mean, this is most people's sort of very small, narrow window into which they view, interact and experience politics in the week. They have far better things to be doing with their time than following every cough and spit like someone like me. So Prime Minister's Questions is the sort of 30 minutes where they really get to see what the politicians' arguments are. The problem is if you have sort of too many prepared lines, if you're not sort of fast enough on your feet to be able to adapt to what is being criticised of you, then you can sort of look too rehearsed, and I suspect that that's probably what happened here. I think people close to Rishi Sunak suggest he probably didn't hear Keir Starmer say that Brianna Ghey's mother was in the gallery, but in the sort of session afterwards, the huddle with Downing Street, they again were sort of defending the line that he used. They were saying it was perfectly legitimate to highlight criticisms of Sir Keir Starmer without then getting drawn into what a woman was or wasn't and the appropriateness of that. This is really, I think, probably going to be the start of quite a bitter, potentially at times slightly toxic election year as both parties trade insults at each other.
Yes, interesting. And many commentators have said that this is a reminder that at the end of every culture war, there are real people as well. But let's move to one of those flip-flop accusations, shall we, which is in the Daily Telegraph, Starmer abandons this £28 billion Green Pledge, which has been on, off, and leaves us all confused then, Annabelle.
Well, it does, particularly over the last week, because we've had various shadow cabinet members coming out and insisting that either Labour will press ahead with this £28 billion green prosperity plan, and later others suggesting that it might be watered down in some way, the sums reduced, even if the intention is still there. What's interesting on the cover of the Telegraph, of course, is that the story comes alongside a warning about the UK's debt crisis, and arguably one of the reasons why Keir Starmer feels as though he needs to backtrack on his £28 billion a year by 2030 pledge is because Labour simply don't know the extent to which the public finances are in a very parlous state. And so I imagine that in response to yet another U-turn, 30 U-turns, as the Prime Minister told us earlier today, that Keir Starmer will insist, the Labour Party will insist that it's the Tories leaving them with no money left, as Liam Byrne famously said in 2010, whereas perhaps the Tories will use this, as they have done with net zero policies in the past, to put clear blue water between themselves and Labour and try and tighten the screws on them in that way.
So what was the error? Putting a figure on it, as in 28 billion, and what is now, are we going to hear, is left of this policy?
So, I mean, I think there is some context to this. So Labour could have made the argument that they put the £28 billion figure on this back in 2021, before the mini-budget, before everything that everyone can remember happened to the economy. It sort of didn't happen completely in abstract. But I think there has been a sort of calculation made that it is less damaging for the party to have to sort of suffer accusations of flip-flopping than the opposite, which is effectively to go into the election and say Labour sort of can't be trusted with the economy, they're sort of frittering away spending. And I think this shows now that Labour is even more determined to win the campaign. There was a sort of battle going on between people who were focused on what should happen after they won, if they did, and those who were looking more at the campaign. Those who were more on the campaign side, like Jonathan Ashworth and Patrick McFadden were suggesting this was really going to start costing Labour on the doorstep. They were worried it would dent Labour's lead in the opinion polls as well. Then you had people who were looking more ahead to what Labour might do in government, people like Sue Gray, and suggesting that if you really want to make big changes, if you're sitting down in access talks with civil servants within the next few weeks, this is exactly the sort of thing you need to hammer out. And I suspect it's happening now, partly because the deadline for submitting final policies is, I think, in 24 hours' time for the Labour Party. So they needed to clear this up once and for all.
For their manifesto, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Just got a couple more stories if we can get them in. One of which is the Financial Times, Netanyahu rejecting the proposals on the table for a ceasefire, calling Hamas's recent demands delusional, Annabelle.
Yes, that's right. So Hamas have come with an offer, the terms of which they cannot surely have imagined Israel would agree to, including a 4.5-month ceasefire, Hamas's continued governance in the region, the release of 1,500 Palestinian prisoners, and other players now feeling as though they're going to try and step in, like Qatar, to renegotiate the terms, which Netanyahu has quite understandably said simply not something that Israel is able to agree to. Of course, if Hamas stay, then they will take the opportunity to rebuild, to regroup, to recover from the last few months of conflict, and potentially prepare for another massacre like that we saw on October the 7th. Of course, the backdrop to this, the context to this, is we have Joe Biden, whose resolve seems to be softening. We had David Cameron last week talking about a possible ceasefire, two-state solution. Certainly to Hamas, it would look as though Western resolve is slightly faltering, and perhaps this is them trying to engage in a sort of propaganda move, tighten the screws, not least on Joe Biden in an election year when he will not want any more US troops in the region than need to be.
Yes, and a very strong warning from the UN Secretary-General about not going towards Rafah, which seems to be next in Israel's sides in their total victory, as he declared again today. Lots more still to come in the next part of our programme. Prince William joining Tom Cruise, you might notice the pictures, there we are, at an event as he thanks well-wishers for their support towards the King and the Princess of Wales. The Sun's headline, Top Son.
So let me introduce you to Daniel Fairbrother. Tell me all about it. Turn around first of all, let me see the fridge.
Yes, so this is Tallulah, my fridge.
There she is. And tell us why she's called Tallulah.
So Tallulah is named after Cool Runnings, one of my favourite films growing up.
It's the rig, isn't it?
That's correct. Yeah, they famously named their bobsleigh Tallulah.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a bit of fun to play on words. And yeah, I've called her Tallulah, and she's currently the second lady in my life at the moment. So my best friend Sam, he's type 1 diabetic. Last year I tried to take on a challenge for him to raise some money for Diabetes UK. It didn't go as planned, and that frustrated me. So I said to him, look, I'm going to come up with a bigger and better idea. And I heard about a world record for the London Marathon for fastest marathon run with a fridge. And I thought I could do that. Why, I don't know, but I just know that it's something I can achieve. And thankfully, it's going well and it's attracted a lot of attention. The biggest issue is the additional weight to my body. My legs at the moment are struggling, they're feeling it. I have to have a very different running style, so I'm sort of hunched over, everything against that you want to do when you're running. It doesn't help with your breathing. Windy days aren't fun. I'm like a lorry on the motorway being blown about. Yeah. So there's lots of challenges, but the biggest one is weight at the moment. There's a metal frame that runs down my back underneath the fridge, and it's strapped fairly well to Tallulah on there. As long as I can get the straps tight on the fridge, on the backpack, sorry, the fridge is pretty good and it sort of sticks with me. But it's been a learning curve being able to run with the fridge because, like you say, it's not normal at all. I'm hoping to raise £10,000 for Diabetes UK. I do have a Just Giving page set up.
Tell us.
If you want to have a look, it's Just Giving Daniel Fairbrother, which is my name. My story will come up, all my runs are logged on there. So the record stands at 4 hours, 52 minutes and 10 seconds.
I couldn't do that without a fridge.
Yeah. I'm training to do it in 4.5 hours.
OK, and how's the training going?
It's going really well, thank you. I did a half marathon at the weekend. That's the longest I've run so far. That was really positive. I do train with a lot of hill sections involved, so I'm hoping that will help pay off on the flat roads of London. It's a standard fridge. It's got all the shelves in there, so it's completely standard.
Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me once again, Aubrey Allegretti, Chief Political Correspondent of The Times newspaper, and Annabel Denham, Deputy Comment Editor at The Telegraph. Welcome back to both of you. So, possibly our favourite front page of the night, The Sun. Top son, you know, there he is. Will's thanks well wishes for supporting his Pa and Kate as he joins Tom Cruise at a charity do. In fact, some really nice comments actually from William. I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you also for the kind messages of support for Catherine and for my father, especially in recent days. It means a great deal to us all. It's fair to say that the past few weeks have had a rather medical focus, so I thought I'd come to an air ambulance function to get away from it all. So there we are, making a bit of a light-hearted joke for what presumably been a very difficult few weeks for them. Just some flash photography coming up as we take a look at those pictures of the Prince with Tom Cruise himself.
Absolutely, and I mean, top son, the son really giving Wills the sort of golden boy treatment, and then you can sort of see shoved up in the top right-hand corner, Prince back to work as Harry jets off. So the sort of contrast that they're trying to make between what Wills is doing and what Harry's done, very, very clear. Obviously, some very dapper pictures of Prince William there. Rekindling his love of, at some point, being a sort of air ambulance pilot as well, so probably challenging Tom Cruise at some point, but, you know, he's clearly trying to show his face, be out and about. I think earlier he was at another event at Windsor Castle.
Investiture, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So then he sort of nipped over to this gala as well to raise money for a London air ambulance charity. So
that's quite a coup, isn't it, for a charity event? Let's be honest about it.
Well, absolutely, yes, they'd be thrilled.
Yeah. The Daily Mail also has the thank you so much for all of your kindness lines in it as well. William's message to the nation, as the Mail points out, his brother jets back to LA after 26 hours and some 30 minutes of FaceTime with his father, Annabelle.
Yes, an extraordinarily fleeting visit from Prince Harry, and I expect many people hoped that the King's shock diagnosis might bring the family closer together. Obviously, the King and Prince Harry haven't seen each other since the Queen's funeral, Queen Elizabeth II's funeral back in autumn 2022. It's a long time for them to have spent apart, and yet when Harry came over, such a short 30-minute visit with his father, perhaps simply because King Charles wasn't up to seeing any visitors for any longer than that. But amazing, I think, grace and courage from Prince William, his first day after the diagnosis of his father, and of course Catherine, his wife, at home recovering from a 2-week spell in hospital after major abdominal surgery. So the royal family have been through a lot.
Yes, and in fact the Metro, as we just conclude this, incredibly broken. Prince is still apart as royals rally for Charles, with the Princess Anne, you know, continuing to work, making underwater explosives expert, we're told today, so she's working hard. To the eye, though, now, an extraordinary story. Viagra has been linked to a reduced risk of Alzheimer's, and the figures, 18% here in a study of 300,000 men, are high, aren't they, Aubrey?
Certainly is, and the Eye tells us that this finding sort of fuels hopes that the drugs which are obviously used to treat erectile dysfunction could be a very cheap way of trying to battle the sort of risk of people getting dementia. We know it obviously has huge, long-lasting emotional and costly consequences for people as well. Scientists are, however, warning men against starting to take them as a precautionary measure. So, you know, as always, the newspaper's getting very excited about a study, but the sort of experts saying, you know, calm down, this is a sort of first result. Probably people shouldn't rush to the shop to try and get these prescribed.
Yes, you need to extract what Viagra does so well and use it differently, I guess, don't you, really, for that one? But, yeah, an extraordinary study, as you say, and the comment here from Alzheimer's Research UK, well, this is encouraging. It doesn't yet confirm whether these drugs can slow or stop the disease, which is always the problem with these studies, isn't it? Right, we'll see you next time. Thank you very much indeed. Aubrey, Annabelle, thank you very much. We'll see you for the 11. Right now, let's take a look at the weather and those weather warnings.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, rain spreading from the southwest tomorrow will turn increasingly to sleet and snow over central parts. The Met Office does have amber warnings for snow and ice over parts of central Britain tomorrow, while yellow warnings for snow, ice and rain are in place more widely over the UK and Ireland. Northern parts will have a fine frosty start. The south will be mostly wet and windy. Some snow falling over parts of Ireland and Wales, mainly on higher ground. Rain in the south will edge north tomorrow morning, turning increasingly to snow across central parts of both the UK and Ireland, especially on the hills. Some disruption likely, 2 to 5 centimetres of snow possible at low levels, rising to 25 centimetres above 300 metres. Expect some drifting in the stiff wind as well. And Scotland looks fine but cold.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.